The 2020 Friar Contest. Question 1 reads, Annie, Bogdan, Tao, Daniel, and Emily are running for student government positions. Their campaign posters are printed by different printing companies. The graph to the right plots each student's total price of their first batch of posters versus the number of posters in their first batch. Part A reads, Daniel pays $16 for 10 posters, which is a price of $1.60 per poster. What does Tao pay per poster? First up, let's look at the unit of the value we're looking for, which is Tao's pay per poster, which the unit should be dollars per poster, which is right here. Next, let's locate Tao's coordinate on the graph, which is the C right here. From the graph, we see that Tao pays $7 for 14 posters. So $7 for 14 posters is 50 cents per poster. Part B reads which two students are paying the same price per poster. For this, there are two approaches that we can take, and we'll look at both. The first approach is to calculate the cost per poster for each person. For that, we need to look at the graph for each person's coordinate. So first up, let's look at Annie's coordinate. So Annie, her coordinate is right here, which we see that Annie pays $10 for 5 posters, which comes out to $2 per poster right here. Next, we'll look at Bogdan. So Bogdan, the coordinate is right here, which means that Bogdan pays $8 for 8 posters, which comes out to $1 per poster right here. Tao, we know that Tao pays 50 cents per poster because that's what we calculated in part A. And for Daniel, we know Daniel pays $1.60 per poster because we're given that also in part A. And lastly, for Emily, we need to look at the graph again. So Emily's coordinate is right here, which means that Emily pays $15 for 15 posters. That comes out to $1 per poster. Now, examining each person's cost per poster, we see that Bogdan and Emily have the same cost per poster of $1 per poster. The second approach is to use the slope of lines from the origin. This approach will be quicker than the first approach, but requires knowing about slopes of lines as well as making a couple of important observations on the graph. The first observation that we need to make is that notice that each person's cost per poster is actually the slope of the line from the origin to that person's point on the graph. Let me illustrate what that means on this graph here. So here, let's take a look at this graph. On the y-axis, we have the total price, and on the x-axis, we have the number of posters. And we know the slope of a line is the change in y over the change in x. And in this particular graph, that would mean the change in total price over the change in the number of posters, which is exactly the cost per poster. So this means that for each person, the slope of the line from the origin to their point on the graph is their cost per poster. So let's draw out some of these lines and take a look. So for Annie, the line is this, and for Bogdan, the line is here. For Tao, the line is here. For Daniel, the line is here. And finally, for Emily, the line is here. And what we see from here is that Bogdan and Emily, their points lie on the same line from the origin, meaning that they have the same slope from the origin to their point. And as we said earlier, that means then they have the same cost per poster. And notice in this approach, we didn't even calculate the cost per poster for each person. We directly used the graph to find out which two people have the same cost per poster. Part C reads, in Daniel's second batch, he needs to print 40 posters. He can pay $60 to print these 40 posters at his local library. To spend less money on the second batch, should Daniel print these 40 posters at the library, or should he continue to pay the same price per poster using the company that printed his first batch? So first off, let's take a look at how much Daniel would pay at the current company. So we know from part A that we have Daniel pays $1.60 per poster. So this means that for Daniel to print 40 posters, he will need to pay $1.60 times 40, which is $64 to print the 40 posters at the company. Now we're given in the question that he can pay $60 to print these 40 posters at his local library. And since $64 is more than $60, then Daniel should save money to print at the library. Part D says Annie's printing company charged $10 for her first 5 posters. Her company will charge her a lower price per poster for additional posters. Emily's printing company charges a fixed price per poster for any number of posters. By the end of the campaign, Annie and Emily each have printed 25 posters and have spent the same amount of money. What price is Annie charged per additional poster? So for this question, we can set up an equation and solve for the price that Annie is charged per additional poster. To start off, let's define our variables. So we'll let x be the price Annie is charged per additional poster. Now let's write an equation using x. And to do that, we're given in the question that Annie and Emily paid the same amount of money in total for their 25 posters each. So let's equate the total amount of money that they spent. So for Annie first, we know Annie paid $10 for the first 5 posters, and now we need to know how much she paid for the remaining posters. Well, how many remaining posters are there? There's 25 minus the 5 that she printed. So that's the number of additional posters that Annie prints, and we know the price per additional poster is x, as we defined in our variable. So altogether, that would be the price that Annie paid for the 25 posters she printed. On the right-hand side, we'll write out how much Emily paid for the 25 posters. Here, we know that from part B, we calculated Emily's price per poster is $1 per poster right here. So then her total price would be $1 per poster times the 25 posters. Now we have an equation, and we can go ahead and solve it. At the first step, let's collect some like terms. So first, on the left-hand side, we have 25 minus 5, which leaves us with 20 times x right here. And on the right-hand side, we have 1 times 25, which just leaves us with 25. The 10 stays the same. Now, the next step here, we can subtract 10 from both sides. So on the left-hand side, we're left with 20x. And on the right-hand side, 25 minus 10 leaves us with 15. Finally, let's divide both sides by 20. On the left-hand side, we're left with just x. And on the right-hand side, 15 divided by 20 is 3/4. Now, this is one of the rare times when we should use decimals in our answer because we're dealing with money. So we should instead write 3/4 as 0.75 of a dollar. And finally, so Annie pays $0.75 or 75 cents per additional poster that she printed.